History rarely changes during quiet weeks, it changes during noise. During war, during panic, during spectacle. Not because people are careless, but because attention is limited. Public attention is a resource. Like capital, like labor, like time. And when attention is consumed, scrutiny falls. This matters more than it first appears. Because most institutional change is complex, technical, difficult to explain quickly, it requires focus to evaluate. And focus is scarce during disruption. History shows a pattern. Major structural decisions are often finalized when the public is looking somewhere else. Not always by design, but often by timing. There is an old political saying, "Never waste a crisis." It is usually quoted with suspicion. But it is often practiced with sincerity. When systems break, leaders act fast. Speed feels responsible. Delay feels dangerous. And in moments of uncertainty, the public often agrees, not because they are manipulated, but because stability becomes the priority. Understanding this pattern requires restraint. We are not looking for secret plots. We are looking for decision environments. Conditions change behavior. Pressure changes standards. Fear changes tolerance. And distraction changes what gets approved without resistance. Consider how attention works at scale. A population can process only so much at once. When one event dominates headlines, other decisions move quietly, not hidden, but underexamined. This is not new. It appears in financial history, war history, regulatory history. Moments of overload produce moments of acceptance. The public does not lower standards deliberately. Standards shift because bandwidth shrinks. The result is not deception. The result is compression. Debate becomes shorter. Review becomes faster. Opposition becomes fragmented, and complexity gains an advantage. Because complex proposals benefit from urgency. The more technical the change, the more it relies on trust, and trust expands during crisis. Experts are deferred to, institutions are empowered. Temporary authority is granted, at first. Temporary is the important word, because temporary measures often outlive the moment that created them. Not through conspiracy, through inertia. Structures, once built, resist removal, especially if they appear to work, and early success often prevents later reversal. This is the first mechanism of distraction, not blindness, but priority shift. The question changes from, is this ideal, to will this stabilize the situation? That is a lower bar, and lower bars pass more policies. We will examine how this plays out in practice. In finance, in regulation, in emergency powers. Because distraction is not only noise, distraction is urgency, and urgency is persuasive. Even when no one intends persuasion, attention does not disappear, it gets redirected. And redirection changes outcomes. When the public focus narrows, decision space widens for institutions. Not because oversight vanishes, but because participation drops. Fewer voices engage deeply, fewer objections are organized. Complex proposals move faster through thin attention. This is not manipulation by default. It is a property of overload. Consider crisis legislation. Large financial reforms are rarely passed in calm periods. They follow shocks, bank runs, market crash, liquidity freezes, moments when delay feels irresponsible. In those moments, the question becomes practical. What will stop the bleeding? Not what is philosophically perfect. Not what preserves balance long-term. Stability comes first, structure comes second. Debate comes later, later is important, later often never comes. Because once stability returns, urgency disappears. And without urgency, reversal loses momentum. Temporary tools become permanent architecture. We can observe this across financial history. Emergency lending programs become standing facilities. Temporary guarantees become expected protections. Crisis coordination becomes central authority. Each step is rational in isolation. Together, they produce expansion. Expansion of mandate, expansion of scale, expansion of discretion. No single step feels dramatic, but the accumulation is structural. Another mechanism operates alongside urgency, cognitive fatigue. During prolonged disruption, people simplify their judgments. Trust replaces analysis. Credentials replace argument. Institutional voice replaces public debate. This is human, not political. Under stress, people conserve mental energy. They rely on recognized authorities. This increases compliance with expert-driven solutions, even when those solutions are experimental. Especially when those solutions promise safety. Safety is persuasive during uncertainty. Not emotionally, practically, safety narrows acceptable risk. Policies once considered excessive begin to feel reasonable, not because values changed overnight. Because tolerance did. Tolerance compresses under threat. History shows this pattern repeatedly. Financial guardrails loosen during booms, controls tighten during crash. Authorities gain tools during downturns. They rarely surrender them fully afterward, because risk never fully disappears. There is always a reason to keep the mechanism ready. Preparedness justifies permanence, and permanence builds institutional memory. Institutional memory builds authority. Authority builds expansion. Again, not conspiracy, sequence, pressure, response, retention. We should also distinguish visibility from awareness. Many crisis-era policies are publicly reported. They are not hidden. But they are not deeply examined by most people at the time, because attention is occupied elsewhere, front pages are finite. Public conversation is finite, bandwidth is finite, and complexity competes poorly with urgency headlines. The outcome is predictable. High-noise environments favor fast architecture. Slow objections lose the clock, and the clock matters. Because procedure rewards momentum, not perfection, not consensus, momentum. In the next section, we will look at specific historical moments where distraction and urgency reshaped acceptance thresholds, without secrecy, without plots, without coordination, only timing. Let us look at how this works in practice, not in theory, in history. Financial panics provide clean examples. During banking shocks, trust evaporates quickly. Withdrawals accelerate, liquidity disappears. At that point, speed outranks ideology. Authorities introduce tools that would face resistance in calm times, emergency lending windows, deposit guarantees, asset purchase programs. These are technical measures. Under normal conditions, they invite long debate. During crisis, they pass with urgency. This is not evidence of deception. It is evidence of priority shift. Prevent collapse first. Evaluate structure later. Later often becomes permanent. Consider deposit insurance. Before widespread bank failures, many policymakers resisted it. They argued it could encourage reckless behavior. That concern was not irrational, it was widely discussed. But after systemic bank runs, the public priority changed. Safety outranked discipline. Deposit guarantees became acceptable. Then expected, then foundational. That is a threshold shift. Not forced, crossed. War finance shows a similar pattern. Large conflicts require rapid funding. Governments expand borrowing powers. Central banks expand coordination roles. Currency controls appear. Capital restrictions appear. These are introduced as temporary measures, often sincerely, because the emergency is real. After the conflict, some controls are removed. Some are not. Administrative capacity remains. Legal authority remains. Institutional reach remains. The crisis ends, the structure stays. Another example appears in market regulation. Major crashes are followed by rule expansion. Disclosure rules, reporting rules, supervisory powers. Each rule addresses a failure point. Each rule is justified. But the total system becomes more centralized over time. Because coordination favors scale, small authorities struggle in large crises. Large authorities gain legitimacy by acting decisively. Performance builds acceptance. Acceptance builds mandate. Mandate builds reach. There is also a media effect. Not propaganda. Focus. News cycles concentrate attention. When one dominant story fills coverage, secondary policy stories receive less scrutiny. Not zero scrutiny, reduced scrutiny. Complex regulatory changes rarely compete with dramatic events. They are covered, but not absorbed widely. Absorption matters more than publication. A rule can be public and still be socially invisible. Because visibility is not the same as attention. This distinction is critical. Many structural changes are openly documented, but poorly understood at the moment of adoption. Understanding arrives later. After implementation, after normalization, after dependence forms. Dependence is another acceptance driver. Once markets adapt to a support mechanism, removing it becomes disruptive. Disruption creates political cost. Political cost discourages reversal. So temporary support becomes embedded expectation. Expectation becomes entitlement. Entitlement becomes structure. This is how crisis tools mature into institutions, gradually, procedurally, legibly, nothing hidden, but not fully examined at birth. In the final section, we will connect these patterns: distraction, urgency, complexity, retention. Distraction does not create change by itself, it changes the conditions of evaluation. Under calm conditions, people ask structural questions. Who gains power? Who holds authority? What are the long-term risks? Under crisis conditions, the question changes. What works right now? This is a rational shift, but it produces asymmetric outcomes. Short-term solutions are judged by immediate effect. Long-term consequences are deferred. Deferred evaluation weakens resistance. Not because resistance is wrong, because it is late. Timing decides which arguments matter. An argument raised before adoption is obstruction. The same argument raised after adoption is inconvenience. Procedure favors early momentum. This matters because institutions are path-dependent. Once built, they shape future choices. Future crises are then managed using the last crisis framework. Framework reuse accelerates expansion, because building new tools is slow. Extending existing tools is fast. Speed wins during pressure. So expansion becomes the default response. Not from ambition, from practicality. We should be careful here. Institutional growth is not automatically harmful. Many expansions prevented deeper collapses. Many interventions stabilized fragile systems. This is fact, but stabilization has side effects. Every safety mechanism redistributes risk. Every guarantee shifts behavior. Every backstop changes incentives. These effects appear slowly, often decades later, which means they are invisible at the moment of acceptance. Distraction amplifies this delay, because the adoption moment is crowded. Crowded moments produce narrow debate. Narrow debate produces durable structures. Durable structures produce inherited constraints. Future generations live inside decisions they did not evaluate. This is not a failure of democracy, it is a limitation of attention. Attention is finite, complexity is not, so what is the practical lesson? Not suspicion of every crisis measure, not rejection of emergency tools. The lesson is awareness of timing effects. When noise is highest, acceptance thresholds are lowest. When urgency peaks, scrutiny drops. That is human, which means it is predictable. And predictable patterns deserve deliberate review, especially after stability returns. Post-crisis review is where balance can be restored, but only if review is intentional, because once normal returns, attention moves again. And structures continue quietly. Most power shifts do not arrive with declarations. They arrive with paperwork, votes, mandates, technical adjustments. Passed during crowded hours. Remember the distinction. Correlation is not conspiracy. Catalyst is not intent. Outcome is not always design. But outcomes still matter, and timing still shapes acceptance. History shows this pattern clearly. Change rarely wins during silence. It wins during noise. The record is public. The implications are subtle. The question is not whether this happens. The question is whether we notice when it does.